we got the pro day coming up, Billy, next Friday. As you mentioned to me, we've got about 15 players that will take part there, most hoping to get free agent contracts, a few hopefuls for the NFL draft itself. KEVONTAE Turpin, the most well-known in regards to his playmaking ability that you see on the highlights for the people that don't watch the actual games. Ben Banagu, who I've always pronounced his name like that. You gave me a different pronunciation, but 18 tackles for loss and 8 sacks. Obviously a guy that if you watch a little TCU football jumps off the screen, and is a guy that's very familiar to people in the Big 12 and across the country.
Yeah, so Ben Banagu.
Banagu.
He's become he's one of my favorite players. He's also just a super nice dude. Last year at the spring game, he wasn't playing in the spring. He didn't have to. He was a preseason Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Me and him just literally spent the entire spring game last year talking on the sideline, just about football, life, whatever. So the whole 45 minutes just talking about the game. And he's a great guy. Whoever takes him, I've heard he'll probably be a mid to late second-round draft pick. Me as a diehard Saints fan, they're sitting there with one pick this year, and they have the second-round pick. I hope they take Banagu because he's amazing, great dude. The other guy that's been climbing up the draft charts is LJ Collier, who, if you just watch TCU play, you're probably, oh, Banagu's everywhere. Number 15's everywhere. But Collier is a lot bigger than Ben, and he's more of a defined pass rusher. He's a guy who probably going into the combine and the Senior Bowl was probably going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick. But he was a star in the Senior Bowl, had a really impressive pro scouting combine performance there. He probably jumped up into a late 1st, maybe early 2nd round pick. I know the Raiders were all over him as far as how they're talking to guys and whatnot. So maybe with that first pick in the 2nd round, LJ Collier goes to the Raiders. That's kind of what a lot of people were mocking and projecting there. So Collier is a pure defensive end. Banagu might be playing more linebacker in the 2nd level. You mentioned KEVONTAE Turpin. So if you're not familiar, he's the guy that got kicked out of TCU midway through last season for beating up his girlfriend, domestic violence issues. He was kicked off the team, kicked out of school. Gary Patterson did say about 2 weeks ago that if Turpin was going to therapy and gotten all of his legal matters taken care of, he'd be welcomed back with open arms to pro day. I asked Gary Patterson about this on Thursday. He said it is, quote, not looking good right now for Turpin to come back and participate in pro day. He says NFL teams want him, but he has to have standards for himself and for his program. So as of now, I do not expect KEVONTAE Turpin to participate in TCU's pro day. I bet he still gets on a good workout somewhere in the Fort Worth area, but I do not think he'll be taking part in TCU's pro day next week. And then one more guy that is likely going to get drafted is Ty Summers. Also was at the combine, also had some pretty good performance as a linebacker. He played mostly defensive end at TCU, but moved to linebacker his last season and a half or so due to injuries and whatnot. No, he played mostly linebacker, but moved to defensive end. I got that in reverse. Ty Summers will play linebacker at the next level. He's 2nd all-time in TCU's tackles. He's a really good, fundamentally sound player. He might be a special teams guy that has to work his way up for a couple years, but he's just a quote-unquote hard-nosed football player. He'll be a 6th or 7th round pick, in my opinion, due to his injury history, but I think he's a guy to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, LJ Collier, as you mentioned, 11.5 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. Ty Summers, 46 stops last year. But he's been around campus for a long time. So as you mentioned, his career totals are big, 5.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. KEVONTAE Turpin caught 145 balls in his career. Obviously, a big menace in the, pardon the pun there, big menace in the return game for opponents as well, in 15 career touchdowns. And KEVONTAE Turpin is just a guy that he and who is the receiver for the Washington Redskins? I'm losing his name right now. Yes. Those are the 2 guys that come to mind as the prototypical TCU new era Gary Patterson guys, having quick little jitterbug guys that make people look foolish in open space, and then the tall, lanky, freakish receiver that is just a superior athlete.
Yeah, Dotson was a phenomenal athlete, All-American here at TCU, great player. Hasn't quite put it all together at Washington. He's had some really good games. It's not like he's been a total bust. He's probably been the best receiver in that first-round class that had the guy from Baylor who's been traded a whole bunch of times now, and Laquan Treadwell went to Minnesota. So that those 3 guys all went in a row. I think Dotson's had the best career out of those 3 guys. So it's been touch and go with him. Turpin, again, phenomenal player. You mentioned the jitterbugness. His last game as a TCU player this year had a kickoff or is either a kickoff or a punt return touchdown and a receiving touchdown. He can absolutely fly. He can play, a great returner, but he beat up his girlfriend. So you can't just say this, that, and the other thing and then not mention his past. In my opinion, I've always been a guy that anytime someone mentions Joe Mixon or Kareem Hunt or one of those guys, you got to mention the Tyreek Hill. You got to mention their past too. You got to take it all with it. So I bet he gets a shot with some NFL team. I do not expect him to take part in TCU's pro day, and don't know if TCU will quote unquote recognize him as one of their alums anymore.
Yeah, and at whatever level, this is the evaluation the coaches have to make. They know that they're not going to, whether it's in the NFL with 53 players or at the collegiate level with 85 scholarships and about 105 players, going to have the perfect set of guys that go to church on Sunday and do all the right things, is what I'm trying to say, that you have to take some calculated risks. And if you see some kind of remorse or maybe separation from some of those activities, then you can properly judge and evaluate the person going forward. But it's a difficult task, again, because you have to take some level of risk at some place. But at the same time, I certainly respect those coaches that say, hey, we've seen enough. And we just can't go there. And he has to take accountability for that. That's it. Whether that's in terms of bringing that player back into the program or scouting, recruiting, or drafting that particular player. Interesting stuff from Billy Wessel's TCU's Purple Menace on Rivals. I'll give you Josh Gordon in return for Josh Doxson. You helped me out with Doxson. Josh Gordon, of course, New England Patriots, Cleveland Browns, and Baylor Bears.
Well, there was another guy in the 2014 Baylor team that played against TCU that was just a straight line runner. I'm blanking on his name.
Coleman.
Right? Corey Coleman. That's what it was. Corey Coleman. That's the name I was trying to think of earlier.
Okay.
So Coleman got traded a little bit, but he was in that same draft class with Dotson. So, yeah,
Corey Coleman. Yeah, they really lit it on fire. And obviously all those guys were in play for the 2014 game, 61-58.
Oh, yeah, we get reminded of that all the time down here. But TCU's won every game against Baylor since then, so whatever you want to say.
And a lot of other games as well in comparison. But Matt Rule's got something working there. There's no question about that. Should be interesting in the Big 12.